Let's do it.
Okay. Welcome to all of our webinar viewers for Lutheran Church Missouri Synod City Mission. We have with us today a special guest, the Reverend Marcus T. Zill, who is our Director for Campus Ministry, aka LCMS U. What's your other title?
I gave myself the unofficial title of the Chancellor.
The Chancellor.
Of LCMS U is a fake university, and I'm a fake administrator.
Sounds about right for you, Marcus. And also going along with the Chancellor, you are the host for KFUO's Student Union, and that's your official radio title as Chancellor, I think, right?
Right. It kind of started, the Chancellor thing happened because of the bump music that we chose, and just kind of spontaneously introduced myself as the Chancellor, grooving with the music, and then everybody started calling me that, and I had to kind of keep it. So good thing I didn't call myself something else.
Well, there you go. Well, Marcus has also served 15 years in campus ministry, so he's been there, done that, and now he helps with directing our national initiative to do that. Today, Marcus is going to talk to us about the importance of campus ministry in our urban settings, and I think Marcus's spiritual gift is mainly jocularity. So we're looking forward to a couple.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. Now I got to be knowledgeable and funny.
Yes, you have to be funny, and not only you're national, international, and from what I understand, also intergalactic. So
intergalactic. That's
we
right.
want to hear more about our space ministry. So. All right. So with that, Reverend Zill, take it away.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I guess I do sometimes refer to myself as the minister of levity, just for the sake of being in a room, especially in the middle of bureaucracy. It's kind of nice to get people to kind of lighten up a little bit. So, anyways, thank you, Dr. Shave, for having me, and Dr. Larson and Maria for all of your help. This is a great topic, campus ministry. The vital role, or as I'm calling it here, in an urban academic jungle. What we're going to do here in the next 43 minutes or so, and I'll leave it open for questions at the end. So please do take notes. This is far from a topic that I have all the answers for. Oh, oops, didn't realize I got the little doohickey up there. Sorry about that. But the bottom line is that we're going to learn a little bit about campus ministry in general, just to kind of boot it up, why we care, what is it, what do we do, what's at stake. We'll spend a little time on that, and most of our time kind of talking about the shifting demographics of the academic context. It is really rather startling, and anyways, we'll jump right into it here. So, campus ministry in an urban academic jungle. First things first, I am obligated in my position to show this logo every 1 minute and 33 seconds. So here you go. Actually, I'm not, but I do anyways. But let me get some infomercial stuff out of the way, not knowing who's online or who might be watching this in the archives later. Always get the things that are least important out of the way first, namely a slight infomercial here. If you're not familiar, LCMS U is the name of campus ministry for the Synod. We do a lot of things. We have had 4 conferences, we have them biannually. Always tackle very tough topics. Very, very, we go right for the throat of what we need to discuss in our academic culture. 4 years ago, the entire context was taboo, what we haven't been talking about in the church, namely marriage and sexuality. CPH developed a book after many of the presentations at that conference. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, was Liberty. Went to Washington, D.C. and focused on our issues related to religious liberty. That was at the University of Maryland. And our last conference was on witnessing, and featuring another of Steve and my colleagues, Dr. Mark Wood, with his Everyone Has Witnessed materials, putting that in kind of a context for college students. And that was so well received, they upped the ante on getting a campus ministry, not a module, but kind of a supplement to Everyone Has Witnessed for our college students. So that was well received. Dr. Shave mentioned, I'm the host of the Student Union. You can catch it every Wednesday on KFUO. Of course, all campus ministries, lots more I could say, all campus ministry. It's really about putting these awesome logos all over the United States map. But seriously, all these logos represent where we have chapters. Of course, there's college students everywhere, and there are places. I happen to be coming to you from, I'm deployed and live in Albuquerque, New Mexico here, so this is kind of home base for me. I had spent 15, 16 years at this one up here in Laramie, Wyoming. As you can probably tell, most of our little LCMS U's, our chapters are right where we have most of our Lutherans. So it's kind of how the country goes, and as our demographics in the Synod go too. But all campus ministry is ultimately local. Every campus ministry can make up their own. We make up for them their own custom logo if they wish. This one is for the Ohio State University, which I know Dr. Shave has it muted, but he's yelling "Go Buckeyes" or trying to dot an I somewhere there in the International Center. So anyways, our slogan, college is tough, you need Jesus, will help. All right, so why do we have a picture of a moose? This is in Alaska. What we're going to talk about today is really about frontiers in campus ministry. When you think about the last frontier, usually two things come to mind. You think about Alaska, the last frontier. So here's a visual of that. Another frontier you often think about, not as much because we kind of tackled this one a little bit, and that is sending someone to the moon. These are what we think about when we think about frontiers in general. Well, we're going to talk about campus ministry frontiers, specifically one of two that I'm always talking about. There are basically two frontiers in campus ministry that we haven't learned really how to do very well. The first one is the community college. People don't realize that 52% of all college students go to a community college. How many of our 250 campus ministry chapters focus exclusively on a community college? I think one. We might have one. It's tough. It's a different breed. But we got a new frontier, and this one is actually probably even more enormous when we talk about campus ministry in the urban jungle. Now, normally, when you think about the college campus, and not knowing if you're here because you're interested in the urban context but don't know much about campus ministry, maybe you're interested in campus ministry, don't know as much about the urban context. But when we think about campuses, quintessential college campus, this is kind of the picture we get in mind. The autumn fall colors, the beautiful grass, the quad in the middle of it, stately trees, stately buildings, Old Main, and dotting the countryside, the typical quintessential college town. This is actually St. Olaf College in Minnesota, if you're trying to figure it out. But this is what a typical college looks like. This is the one I was privileged to serve at for 15, 16 years. The University of Wyoming looks fairly similar, fairly self-contained. It's always great. Many colleges, I don't know why, have graveyards attached. They have two things: golf courses and graveyards, usually for space, for expanding. Or maybe if students don't make it through, they just have an easy place to shovel them off to. I don't know. But my campus ministry, St. Andrew's Lutheran Church and Campus Center, is down here, right here where my cursor is at the moment, right next to the Alumni Center and parking, right on the main drag through town. Here's the dorms are all right over here. Here's the student union, the library, the main pasture, which you got to love this in Laramie, Wyoming. When they built this campus, they bought it off a guy who was a rancher. Because if you're in Wyoming, that's what you do. And the rancher said, "You can have my land as long as you name for your college there, for that education, as long as you name it after my cow." and his cow's name was Prexy. And so this to this day is known as Prexy's pasture, and all horses are allowed, horses, cows, you name it, animals are allowed to go on it and do their thing simply for that reason. This is important. You knew you were going to get even more. You never know what you're going to get when you turn into these webinars. But this is kind of what we think of the typical college scene. Well, what about our typical campus ministry? Our typical campus ministry, this is the one that I was pointing to with the cursor. Block off a campus, sanctuary, facilities for offices, fellowship, Bible classes, ping pong, etc. This is St. Andrew's Lutheran Church and Campus Center in Laramie, Wyoming, as I refer to it as Laradice. And this very much was the model. What we used to do is we used to try to get as close to the college campus. This is what we've been doing for 75 years in campus ministry. You follow my cursor. What typically campus ministry pioneers did back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s was buy an old house. In this case, we had 2 frat houses here, bought one, used it for 10 years, tore it down, and then built the building. That was the model. Get as close as the campus as you can get, and eventually build what in essence is a church mostly for college students. We probably only have 30 or 40 of these left anymore. There used to be upwards of 70. This is, I wouldn't say it's a dinosaur, it's still the ideal if you can do it. And in many cases, we're fighting to keep these places where we can, because you can't escape the need for having an iconic churchly presence that close to the campus. It's really, really important if you have it. However, a lot has changed. Notice this. That's what the typical the college overview, aerial view looked like in the past. It's increasingly starting to look like this. This is downtown Chicago. It doesn't usually, this probably is going to sneak up on a few of you. The idea that, as we're going to see, and we're going to look at the stats, a great number, an increase. I wouldn't say it's a majority yet, but I say we're getting close to nearly a third of all college students go to school in an urban context, meaning it looks more like this than that. So the question is, what do? We can't use this as a model here because, you know, buying property from Trump Tower or the Chicago Stock Exchange, that's not going to work. And so you're not going to be nestling a church right up against that. So the question is, what do we do? Now, for those of you who are wondering, seriously, how do you have a college in there? Well, here's one example. This is from Chicago, and I'm getting ready to go and visit this school in a little over a month, and I can't wait to do this. This is what we're dealing with today. This is the Loop, just outside of downtown Chicago, between downtown Chicago and Soldier Stadium. Here you've got the train. Most of these buildings are devoted to art schools, other colleges. If you see here what my cursor is, Roosevelt University. This is what a college, this is the future of colleges. Not that we're getting rid of, just as we have our Ivy League schools, we have our state universities, typical college towns like Laramie and Iowa City, Bloomington, Indiana, Columbia, Missouri, places like that. What we're seeing is this college starts at the ground floor, and it moves its way up. Just imagine going to college where your dorm space is up here. You're living on your room is up here. Most of your academic classes are here. Registration and admin stuff is here. Cafeteria is here. Your fitness areas and rec center is here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is becoming increasingly, I wouldn't say normal, but this is the trend. My sister actually lives, I didn't take this picture, but I can see this picture almost from her window. She lives down on the Loop in an apartment or a condo there. And the first time I went to visit her, I was just blown away at how many young people were there. Not just because I'm 53 and getting older, and so everybody looks young, but the bottom line is everybody was under 25 years old. I mean, literally just about everybody. So this is the future, and it raises the question, how do we deal with it? Now let's talk some stats, and this is, I'm going to show you this a couple of times, And this is, I think this is 5 years old now. I was trying to look for a graphic that really represented this. As you look at this, is the total number of college or graduate students in the United States. That little dot right there represents about 10,000 students. So where did I serve my campus ministry? At that little dot, representing probably 13,000 students. So there aren't that many little dots, but where the little dots are, there are more in rural areas. The bigger dots become more interesting. You look at, obviously, you cannot be drawn to New York, to Chicago, to LA. You don't probably think of San Francisco as a college town. Of course, some of these are Stanford and Berkeley and whatnot. Dallas, Houston, largest university in the country is in Tempe, Arizona State University. It's got now over 100,000 students. And Tempe, Phoenix, which is nearby, also has the largest community college, which is, I think, 130,000 students. Probably didn't think of Miami. University of Miami, Nova Southeastern, Florida Atlantic is down there, and some others. Atlanta. You even look at St. Louis, the holy city. You've got all sorts of schools. You got Lindenwood, you got Wash U, you've got Webster College, you got SIU Edwardsville, you got St. Louis University, you've got the University of Missouri St. Louis. You have 50,000 students in the community colleges. So here the point is, this is where people are going to school. Now these dots all represent people that have souls, so we want to care for all of them. And the reason why most of our, we kind of started at Lincoln, Nebraska as a college town, Lawrence, Kansas. In many ways, after the Morrill Land Act in the late 1800s, many of our universities got planted in these places. In some cases, before a lot of this urbanization really started happening, but also because that's where they had access to the land, and they were mostly concerned with helping to kind of train up those that weren't going to stay on the family farm and were going to go off to school. But what we're seeing now is people, many of our college students, wanting to not go to the traditional college, but in a typical college town like Iowa City or Madison, Wisconsin, but instead going to the big city. First, before we dive into this, I want to give you a little bit of a brief overview. This is a crash course in why we should care about campus ministry and kind of what it is and what's at stake. When I got in my position 5 years ago, every one of my colleagues, I don't know if Steve did, but everybody seemed to have an acronym. So I came up with an acronym of why we care. First of all, catechizing, and you can see it. There's the acronym right there, CAR. I got stuck on CAR for a year, and then eventually I came up with this. CAR is not a very good acronym, but anyways, catechizing and caring for our own, that's job number one. The church is very nervous, and we should be. Our changing demographics, having less children, as well as the increasingly hostile culture to Christianity, is making it tougher and tougher for many of our young people to stay in the church. We usually think of this as affecting those that are going off to college, and that's where they slide out of their faith, if they do. Got news for you. Chances are, if they're still in the faith when they're in college, they got a good shot, because most of them now, I think, are starting to slide out of the faith even before college. But bottom line is catechizing and caring for our own. That's why campus ministry ever begun in the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod. Apologetics in the academic square. We've got something to say to the world. We aren't very good. We don't do the world or our people any good by staying away from the collegiate context and saying, you know what, they're all just a bunch of liberal places anyway, so people can go. So no, we've got something to say. Back in the day when people came over from Europe, when we moved over here, most of the European schools had theology departments, had seminaries eventually, and so do some of the first colleges here in America, the Princeton, the Ivy League type schools, have their own divinity schools. What ended up happening is we in America decided to begin excising theology and seminary away from our schools And it's interesting, even some state universities, the University of Virginia, for example, which was one of the first state schools, actually had a seminary. They still do till today, even though it's a public school. That'll blow your mind. But the bottom line is this is a thing of the past, and we removed what was used to be referred to as the queen of the sciences in terms of the place for religious thought away from the public sphere. If you think about it, Luther himself, he was not at a Concordia University in Wittenberg. He was at State U in Wittenberg, Wittenberg University. He was at the state school where they actually had a theology department. You could say Luther was a campus pastor, in a way. But the bottom line is, well, in many ways that's benefited us by not having to be under control of what the state would want us to teach. The negative is our young people are still going there. And so campus ministry actually rushed in to try to fill this void. Next year we're celebrating our 100th anniversary. It's only been 100 years. First one started at the University of Wisconsin in Madison and most of our Big Ten schools. And why did they start there? Because that was the frontier at the time. So, in essence, what's going on here is that while we have kind of walked away in terms of having direct influence in the classroom, we as a church have understood we need to be where the students are. We need to be there on campus. And you know what? Nothing is going to keep those professors at the college, state university, teaching our young people about religion, thus the idea of philosophy degrees and especially religious studies. They're going to do it because they want to treat the whole person. Well, we have something to say about the whole person too, not just for the sake of offering them young people a place to go to church, but also we have something to say about things in all these disciplines. We have a theology of the body. We have a theology, we have something to say about science and where these things intersect with our faith. And so catechizing and caring for our own apologetics in the academic square, reaching out to those who are lost. 7% of all college students on American soil are international students. Among those, you have 4 main groups make up 75% of all the international students. The Chinese, they're everywhere. I think 3% of all college students. 3 out of every 100 college students in America are Chinese. India, Saudi Arabia, and Kenya, believe it or not. So we have many opportunities to reach out to those who come from a different background, who may or may not believe. In the last generation, there's a study called the American Freshman. UCLA puts it out once a year for the last 30 or 40 years. In short, they kind of do a survey of 150,000 plus incoming freshmen across the country to get their ideas and their attitudes heading into school. And you've all heard of the none category. Well, we have gone from 12% being in the none category 30 years ago on our college campus to 37%. And so basically in one generation, we've lost 25% of the influence in terms of our young people being in the faith as they get to campus. So what does this mean? Ultimately, we have a say engaging a dying culture with Christ in what, in many ways, like it or not, is the incubator of ideas in much of our culture. So what's at stake for any college student is going to be true, whether it's in Laramie, Wyoming, or the Loop in Chicago. Young people are transitioning out of the nest. They're choosing a career path. They're finding a spouse. And of course, what's at stake is their faith. And so we want to make sure we are there for them. In the end, and these stats are a little bit older, but I haven't found a comprehensive enough study to kind of get a new set, but this may be 5-6 years old here. 30% of college students are diagnosed with depression while at college. This is a real thing. Anxiety is huge. 50% will drop out before receiving a degree. I know those first true are true because I've got one in both categories, one of my own. These things are things. 64% will graduate with $40,000 to $60,000 in debt on average. It's probably a little low. 40% of Christian college students will stop going to church. 30% will never return. And of course, 100%, whether they're believers or not, are loved by our gracious God. and he wants to have them in his fold. And admittingly, oversimplification in the college climate and context today. If you haven't been on a college campus lately, these are the things, the buzzwords, the things you need to kind of understand. Purpose of education has changed. Pursuit of truth is no longer the goal. I used to walk a college campus and see huge stately buildings with Latin words like veritas, truth, chiseled into them. Not anymore. No longer is it about what does this mean or what does something mean. It's about what do you want it to mean? What would you like it to mean 5 years from now? How would you like to change it to mean what you think or what you already believe? Tolerance and diversity are the supreme virtues. Of course, those are question the dogma that their absolutes are excluded. We see that increasingly. The privatization of virtues has happened. They're no longer communal but individual. What Satan has succeeded in doing, I believe, is tempting us to no longer see truth or virtue as something outside of ourselves that we're drawn into and that we're a part of, but that it's up for us to identify with whatever set of virtues we would like to, or in essence, create for ourselves. So nothing is outside of oneself, including truth. Everything is internalized. Of course, the old being curved inwards, incurvata se in the Latin, ultimately is what original sin is. Being turned inwards. That's what Satan wants. He wants us to be focused inwardly rather than outwardly. In the end, you've got this gray mishmash, an ethic of emotivism. True debate isn't really welcomed. What people do is they stand next to each other and they just yell at each other. They emote. They don't talk about truth. We very much have a culture of me. College campus is a place for original sinners run amok. So, what is campus ministry and what does it take to do it in any context? I'm going to tell you this in like 2 minutes. And while it says it's top secret, that's just for job security for me. The bottom line is really this simple, so let me tell you. Campus ministry is really not that hard. Sometimes I think we make this too difficult. Look at the word, campus ministry. The ministry, word and sacrament, bringing it to bear on the context of where? The college campus. Seems pretty basic, but that's really what it is. Now, granted, in campus ministry, you're working with people of a certain age, certain time of their life, certain things that they're facing, certain things that they're dealing with. In my 15 years, I had my congregation. We were a congregation. We had everything in terms of the ministry as everywhere else, but 92, 93% of everybody was a college student. But it's still the ministry in that place. So what does it take to do it then? And it doesn't matter, again, if you're in Laramie, Lincoln, Nebraska, or the Loop in Chicago. Campus ministry takes three things. One, a love for the truth of God's word and the gospel, and a willingness to be faithful to it. Because if you don't have that, then what's the point? What is the point if you aren't going to be open, honest, and truthful about what you believe and why? You can find all sorts of things on a college campus. What sticks out like a sore thumb is when we actually decide to be who we are as Lutherans. So being ourselves, being faithful. If you don't do that, I don't care what you do. Doesn't matter. College students can get any of that other stuff somewhere else. So the gospel matters. Doctrine matters. That's number one. What else does it take? And this is the tough thing. This is the universal problem, in essence, is it takes people that are willing to just kind of roll up their sleeves and give a rip and actually get in there and do it. We all want the magic little formula of how to do this, and I'm not going to give it to you today. I'm going to give you some ideas. Things that I would do if I was in the Loop, things that I'm going to explore with those that are going to be starting campus ministry in the Loop in Chicago. And maybe we can learn, maybe we can discover from some others that have been doing this. I did a little research heading into this webinar. There isn't really a whole lot on how to do urban campus ministry. You know why? Because nobody knows how to do it. It's a different frontier, but it's an awesome frontier, and we need to take it seriously. And I also think it can play a vital role in how we can reach out to our inner city core to begin with. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But I said three things. First, the gospel and being faithful to it. Second, giving a rip enough to roll up your sleeves and do the tough work. And third, fire. Yes, fire. Now, that's what I've always preached. Of course, we had a fire pit. The reason why I mentioned this, I think having a fire pit for college students is essential. Why? Because it emphasizes the need to sit around, take a load off, put your little machines down, and talk, and have deep thinking about wherever you go. Nothing is like road tripping or fire pits for that. Now, granted, probably aren't going to have too many fire pits in the Loop in Chicago. Probably wouldn't be a good thing. But the point is, folks, this isn't really that hard. So there's a little walk down the wayside here. So what is a date? Let's get more specific now into the whole urban campus movement. There are approximately, what's the data saying? There are approximately 21 million college students in the United States. I already said about 7%, like 1 million or so are international students, somewhere in there, a little over 1 million. Now, according to the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, IPEDS, this is also already 6 years old, so data goes, over 5 million students, I think 21, 5, but 1 out of 4 attended 1,835 colleges within urban centers. This is only on the uptick. By the way, for those of you interested in international students and even just immigrants, immigration, etc. Sorry about that. This is the first year, I just got this data yesterday, that international students coming to America is kind of tabling off, in part because maybe some of our good, bad, that sandwich of some of our immigration issues in the country and what's taking place. So, but it's right at about 1 million. But 25% of our college students don't go to school in a pastoral setting off next to a cornfield. They go to school in places like the Loop in Chicago and an urban center. So, why the increased desire for an urban collegiate experience? I think this is important so that as we develop, and hopefully if there's any of you on here, including Dr. Shave and Dr. Larson and anyone else, I'm interested in exploring this. I don't have urban experience. I was in Laradice. But I do have campus ministry experience, and we need to meld these two things together and learn from it together. But I think it's helpful to understand why are we seeing this change? Why is it that young people are going in greater numbers to college in an urban center? First of all, I narrowed it down to about 5 things, probably could have been 20. The excitement of a city and the sense of adventure. Young people like the city. They aren't, kind of blown away if things don't look quite right. If there's slummy areas and nicer areas, if there's places that have been abandoned, they don't mind. They don't mind graffiti. They are drawn to where there's kind of a heartbeat and where the action is. And there's so many things to do in the city. And so in many cases, they're drawn there for that excitement. Millennials going to do what millennials going to do, and so are those that follow them. The unrivaled diversity of experience. You really can't really quibble about it. The bottom line is you don't get much more diverse than in our urban cores. Even though, believe it or not, even in Laramie, Wyoming, 12% of the entire population of Laramie, Wyoming was Hispanic, which still blows my mind. But the bottom line is you don't get more diverse. Well, as I just mentioned, they get preached diversity, diversity, diversity. Well, who wants to go where it's most diverse? It's going to be most diverse in the city. Logistical considerations and ease of travel. It's not true in terms of things like moving in or having a dorm space and some of those things, but you also were much more mobile. It's pretty easy. You fly in, students fly to Boston, don't even need a car. Parents help them move, they move in, and otherwise they just fly in, take the train, whatever, go down to New York City for the weekend, whatever. Much, much easier to travel. It's interesting, these last two, and I think these have serious impacts on the idea of what do we do in terms of urban campus ministry and how this all relates to the city, mission in the city. The city itself becomes the campus in terms of culture and experience. You hearken back to that Roosevelt dorm, the tall skyscraper. They don't have football. They don't have basketball necessarily. They don't have a lot of these different things. Maybe you don't have sorority houses. So where does a young person go for entertainment, for fellowship, for whatever? Well, they're in the city. There's plenty of things to do. It's just different from the way many of us are used to it being. So the city becomes the campus. It becomes their laboratory in terms of what they do for fun. It becomes their cultural experiment. I would even argue that in many places, in many of these schools that are developing as skyscrapers and urban centers, they are actually probably going to be more likely to welcome us on campus than others, because they understand that their young people that are coming there are missing out on some things from a traditional school, and we can provide that. But young people also think about it this way: you want an internship? Why not go to school where you're already trying to get a job, or where you might be able to get an internship? Maybe you don't have to move. It's like a one-stop all kind of place. And so just as our business cultures move towards kind of online shopping and going to the big box stores, we have big box store universities sprouting up in our cities, which leads to a third frontier, which is a whole nother beast, which is how do you reach out to young people that are basically taking online classes and have nothing to do with anybody except for online. So what are the implications for urban inner city and campus ministry development in the last maybe 6-7 minutes here? Sorry if this is a little small. These are the things that I've been really pondering the last few weeks as I've been getting ready for this. These are the implications. Campus outreach in the city will be without buildings. It just will be. We aren't going to go and buy property and probably be able to nestle right up against Roosevelt University in the Loop. And if we did, it'd be way too expensive. In many ways, we can't even hardly afford to be near a college or university in a typical college town. So it's going to be that much more so in terms of campus outreach in an urban center. We're not going to be building buildings per se. And so this means that we literally must be on campus in the city. I preach this all the time to everybody who will listen. While it's important, while it's nice to have a campus church, it's nice to have a campus sanctuary. I hate to see us lose any of the ones that we have. And ironically, the Campus Crusade University types that do a lot of stuff on campus and don't have buildings, the one thing that they wish they had are buildings. So we want to learn from them how to do stuff on campus more. They wish that they had what we have, which is a church near a campus. So we're going to have to learn a little bit more from one another and kind of address our situation in terms of how we do Lutheran campus ministry in that kind of a context. But we're going to have to be on the campus. Now, I'm convinced virtually everything you could do could be on a college campus. We've hosted district pastors conferences for the Wyoming district at our school, used our sanctuary, rented space. How? Because as a recognized service organization, a student organization, we could rent out the arena at 15,000 people if we wanted to for free. And so there are a lot of opportunities you have for space, for connectivity, sometimes office space on campus. I would suspect, and I haven't seen it, a couple months from now I'll have a better idea when I go to Roosevelt University, that they probably still have student organizations. They probably have office space for them, cubicles right there in the building where they can have their place to keep their stuff and kind of get mobilized. Now, this is an interesting concept. Students will be spread across multiple campuses. Go to Boston. Eternal question in Boston is, okay, where do we put campus ministry when there's 66 colleges, universities, and 500,000 college students? Well, you know what normally happens? It usually keeps us, when we think about such things, it keeps us from doing campus ministry rather than saying, let's start with one or two, do what we can and branch out. Sometimes you just have to start where you can. Like I said, LA, New York, million plus college students. And it's not insignificant that that's probably where we're least equipped. I'm not saying that nobody's trying anything, but that's probably where we're least equipped to really do what we need to do. But this will be spread across multiple campuses. So even if you wanted to, you're not going to plunk down a campus ministry facility next to one of them at the expense of the others, but it doesn't matter because you're going to be on campus. So utilizing the third bullet, university recognized student organization status. This is more vital than ever, and this is why my office, the office of the president, we pay very close attention to what's going on in terms of religious liberty issues on campus, because we can't lose having a seat at the table. We don't ask for more than anybody else. We just want the same access that others are given. But this is crucial, absolutely crucial, that we keep these opportunities. The ability to show up at student fairs, the ability to rent a table out, to have Bible classes in the student union. All these types of things are on the table if we lose that. Now, number 4, and you wouldn't think this, local churches, big or small, will become even more important. So even though I'm saying we're not building a campus ministry facility like we normally think about, like the one that I showed you where I was privileged to serve and wouldn't trade for anything. Even though we don't have that, young people are still missing the anchors in their life. They're missing home. They realize that they need to go to church. They know that they need to get out. If you're stuck in a skyscraper, you want to get out. They're going to be more likely, we don't even really need to have the church nestled up right next to them, as if they don't see it out their window, they won't come. They're going to get on the train or whatever else they do. They're mobile. They're going to come. And you know what, frankly, and this is where I think urban inner-city mission stuff is so important. Every church that we can keep will be a haven for young people, because I'm convinced that our young people would be more likely in this setting, in an urban setting, to want to go to a smaller church where they can be involved and where their input will be sought after, than to go to a bigger church where they maybe just kind of blend in to the mix. Young people are wanting to serve. College students want to serve. They would rather go to a gritty inner city urban mission type of a context, I believe, than to a typical big box church, or even maybe a normal traditional town and gown kind of campus ministry, because they know that they'll have a chance to get involved. So while it's maybe a negative to not have a campus ministry facility right there, there's also some positives. That church is still church, and every church, big or small, is everything it can offer. And you can get these young people mobilized and involved. It says volumes for things like Lutheran Young Adult Corps, geo-mission opportunities, getting college students engaged in helping in an urban campus context. Where I said that I'm going to go to St. James Lutheran Church. I think it's 4 stops off the L, down to Roosevelt University. So it's only 15 minutes to get there by train, and that's what everybody takes. And so the ocean is the city is your oyster, if you will, if you have access to transportation and use it wisely. And so the opportunities are there. I think that it's important to consider how would campus ministry be different in an urban context? You know, everybody on a typical college campus, college town tries, the old, free pizza for this, that, the other thing. I think you build fellowship and service opportunities around the things that attracted them to the city initially. You don't need to try to outdo the cultural experiences they're getting at. What they're not getting is the gospel. They need opportunities. Maybe you don't have a fire pit. I wouldn't suggest having a fire pit on floor 17 of Roosevelt University, but You do need opportunities for young people to ask their questions, for young people to have the opportunity to raise their concerns, to wonder what the church teaches about this, that, or the other thing. And this underscores, again, why it's not a bad thing to be without a building in that regard. Sorry about that. Last thing, and I want you all to keep this in mind, 7% of all college students are international students. They're going to be even more located in the big cities because that's where immigrant populations already are. And in many cases, these international students, if you get one or two, you can get 50 to come. The University of Wyoming, we had a large Nepalese contingent because we were at 7,200 feet and they suffered the low altitude, if you can believe it. Well, one time I had some Nepalese students come. I didn't just get two, I got like 25, showed up because they wanted to know what a church was like while they were in America. So anyways, in many cases, we have great opportunities. The international student population, I think, can also be a wonderful conduit for us to kind of learn and to kind of help mobilize ourselves to not only reach out to them, but also their extended families, because many of them may live in the communities in many of these diverse areas of the city where we're trying to get into with the gospel. So with that, I see Dr. Shave showed up. It's like being at a conference when the guy at the MC kind of starts walking towards the stage. When
that was the hook.
I see on there, it means that
the hook
is coming. So we got some time for Q&A.
Yeah, so we'll invite everybody to go down to the Q&A box there in their Zoom meeting. If they want to ask a question. I do have a question for you already, but
okay.
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting, and you think about where we're at just society-wise, and how are we going to ever, reach people with the gospel, and such shifts. Like, I look at my family tree, and my great whatever grandfather was actually the second president of Harvard University. And when I learned about his history, he was an actual clergy person and, practicing clergy guy. And yet he was chosen in academics because what was the highest level of education in the 1600s? Who were the most educated people? Who were the most respected for philosophy and logic? And we've shifted so far when it comes to religion as kind of being downplayed and almost being considered to be uneducated. It just seems like an uphill battle. Yet,
that is so crucial because and I love history. I'm kind of a closet historian here. But when we separated out theology from the university, guess what inherently happened over the last century or so? Everybody in the other disciplines started viewing those people that learn theology as being, having a doctorate or a PhD in theology. That's just a bunch of podunk kind of stuff compared to where real learning takes place. And so that's been one of the unfortunate kind of results of separating out State University from schools of theology.
Yeah, but at the same time, as you said, just when we start to lose heart that nobody wants to hear the gospel, like you said, when we had this, one of our national missionaries served, she spoke fluent Mandarin and did most of her ministry through hospitality. But as you said, immigrants who are coming here, they don't have that connection to Thanksgiving dinner. They don't have connection to, hospitality here in the U.S., and they might feel kind of alone, or they want more of the experience, and other people aren't reaching out to them. And you have people that you said, we already had a webinar on mental health, and that's one of the biggest mission fields we have in the U.S. is people suffering from different mental health issues. And especially in college, you've got kids that are confused about their identity and other things. I mean, these are all people that still need the gospel. It doesn't matter what our status is in the world, if we're as regarded as much as we used to be in terms of academics, which we certainly should be. but there are still people hurting. There are still people
Oh,
broken
absolutely.
by sin, and so that will never change. And I think that's why we really need to think about these huge populations of college students, that they still need the gospel today. So, and kind of tying into that, our first question in the Q&A talks about that. How do we equip our students when it comes to those things that are going to be directly challenging their faith? So, they go in their first quarter, maybe they grew up kind of a little bit sheltered, and they get in there, and all of a sudden all these things are challenging their faith: evolution, the origin of the universe, all those things get thrown at them to start to cause them to question these things. What would the resources be that you'd recommend for that?
Well, one of the things, and this is one of the primary things that I've been working on, is the development of what's going to be called our college bound program. We can't wait around until students used to be able to wait around for a kid to show up to college, then have a month or so to kind of track them down. You don't have that luxury anymore because everybody else is tracking them down too. And in many cases, they're losing their faith before they show up. And so, yeah, we need to think more like worldview boot camp for how, I had that picture of one of the pictures I had on here of the moon. One of the, it's not just one of the last frontiers, but when you think about going to college, it's kind of like going to the moon. Everything is different. Everything is radically, it's an entire different universe. Nothing looks the same. Nothing acts the same. Up is down. Down is up. You don't know what to think. It can be a jolt in either direction. And, really, this says a lot. I always get the onus put on the campus pastors, we always get the onus on us. We're getting them after they've had 18 years of prior training to get ready for this. And so in reality, we really need to start shifting our understanding in terms of what we do, especially with our college seniors and juniors, that at the same time that they're doing so much in terms of thinking about where they want to go to school in terms of degrees, they need many of these materials, these worldview kind of resources to kind of have a sense of, okay, I'm getting a sense of what the moon really is like. Because if you think about, if you're going to go to the moon, if you're John Glenn or whoever, and you're going to jump out and onto the moon's surface, you got to get ready. You have to get training. You just don't do it. You just don't show up, and the first time you're there, like, well, might as well just go for it. No, you've done this 100 times in simulation. You've done your training. You've had your PT. You want to show up on the moon's surface and be like, hey, I know exactly what to do. This is what I expected. We have to be more honest with our young people and train them for what to expect and how to respond to it. I do think they're getting much better at the evolution stuff because I think after 30, 40 years of being hammered with that, I think most of our young people are at a point where they know it's an issue, but we've developed enough resources in that regard. They've kind of been there and heard that. But a lot of the other, these newer issues that are coming at us lightning fast are a little bit more tricky. But more than anything, young people need relationships. Relationships matter. They say that every young person, it wouldn't matter if you're an international student or one of our own. Bottom line is you need one person, not your pastor. You need your pastor. You need a pastor or a parent, but you also need one relationship with one other adult, not a fellow student, but one other good relationship with another adult. And I think that's where a lot of our churches in the city, if they take an interest with adopting students at many of these schools, international or otherwise, I think it could have huge dividends because it would fulfill a huge need.
Very good. So catch them in high school, junior, senior year. Don't pretend like we don't know what's coming for them, but prepare them, whether it's about scientific facts that they're going to be challenged with or their beliefs about morality that are going to be challenged. But,
sure.
Make sure that they're equipped because they are called to be a witness. And I kind of with you, I agree. I have 3 kids in college, and not only are they pretty well prepared for evolution, but I've been very surprised. None of the schools that they've gone to have not been at least open to their biblical viewpoint, that they can maintain their viewpoint and hear other theories, obviously. But yeah, I think it's important that they were ready, and
Yeah.
so.
Well, that's all we ask. We just want a seat at the table that everybody else is at in the incubator of ideas.
Right on.
But we need to prepare our young people for what they're going to face in that incubator of ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's shifting in colleges, because they have so many students that are ready, whereas they used to go to college and people weren't, students weren't prepared for they drill you with all these things and you don't have an answer. I think now they see these guys are ready. This is going to be a good debate, and so I can't just write them off like I used to. They're equipped to speak scientifically and academically. So I think that's part of the shift. That's good.
Well, and then just kind of, we got to kind of probably shut this down, right? Can I close it off here real quick?
Yeah.
Just going to put this map up here again, because to me, this map mesmerizes me when I think about what's at stake here in terms of the demographic. Look at all those big dots and where they are. And if I kind of overlaid where most of our campus ministries are, they're not where those big dots are.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that we have to understand is that if we can keep our young people in the faith, obviously we need to be primarily concerned. Remember, I said catechizing and caring for our own, as well as reaching out for the lost and apologetics in the academic square. We need to keep, if we're having less children and then losing the ones that we have, those young people aren't going to be prepared to be incredibly effective witnesses, which they can be. It was the point of our last biennial conference on campus. And those that are there, our college students that are on campus are ready and bold to confess. Because if they haven't lost their faith and they're on a college campus, my goodness, you want to talk about future church workers. I think something like 60% of all of our church workers are now coming from non-Concordias. Well, to have a young person go step into one of these environments, keep their faith and be able to share their faith, holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can get better missionary training, front and central than that. So anyways, just remember, if those of you are on the line or watch this later, this isn't by any means, this is kind of, it's new for me too. It's new for everybody. We're trying to walk through this. But
Right.
Thanks to Dr. Shave and others for willingness to put this idea on the table. And remember that college is tough. Our young people and everybody in the inner city needs Jesus, and we'll do whatever we can to work with all of you in City Mission. Will help.
Right on. And this our mantra is we don't want to lose our footprint in the city. Just too many souls that are at stake, and we want to increase our presence. If we're going to change our culture, it starts in the city, and most especially it starts in our academic centers. So
sure.
We
don't want to lose a footprint in either place. And what we're seeing, though, is that those two places are colliding in many ways.
Right. So some of the greatest mission fields on planet Earth are right here on our campuses in our major cities. And we're very thankful for Reverend Zill being with us today, and hope it sparks some interest in how we can do more urban work with college students. And if you have any questions or you'd like to get some assistance and resources, we certainly encourage you to check out LCMS U and to touch base with Reverend Zill to find out how do we reach into some of the greatest mission fields on planet Earth, and that is our college students right here in the U.S. Thank you, Reverend Zill, for being with us today.
Thanks, Dr. Shea. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Yep. Take care, everyone.